around the country and around the city. And the reason I make a reference to the Freiburger appeal is the doctors there make a special mention of the fact that people cannot sleep, cannot rest, therefore their bodies cannot become recharged and ready for the following day, because the radiation is 24 hours a day. Margaret Cousins, who is probably fairly well known by some here, who has had experiences with this thing since the mid-90s. Experiences began when she had to move from the family home. It was necessary to find some place of respite due to the high levels of radiation in her locality. And she moved out of the family home with her son and husband left behind. She placed a mobile phone about 400 yards from her house and started to feel well. This sense of wellness lasted some months, prompting her to build a permanent home in the same location as the mobile. She moved into this bungalow and, still feeling quite well, began to look forward to a better life. The feeling of well-being was short-lived, as some weeks later she awoke one morning in a state of great agitation and distress, experiencing the same symptoms as before. She contacted her doctor, who said to her, "You are back to square one again, Margaret." Only this time they were much worse. After more than 8 years of trying to get a reasonable response from politicians, national and local, the health boards and the Department of Health, her suffering and agony is still ongoing. Up to yesterday, I had a phone call from Margaret. She has to find suitable sleeping accommodation every night, often moving from locality to locality to find a suitable area. She had to move out of 2 homes. She has spent years going from house to house at night to find somewhere to sleep. Relatives and friends have opened their doors to welcome her and are mystified as to why no one in authority has done anything constructive to help her. In recent months, she has rented a mobile home near Curracloe Beach and sleeps there some nights. During the day, she walks the beach, as going back home is too uncomfortable and distressing. She does manage to make a few trips back home. Helen, who's here with us, Helen McCrory, Helen and her son and daughter were forced to leave their inner city, a new apartment, due to the presence of antenna on the side of a shop in Mary Street, about 35 to 40 metres from her bedroom window. Helen, at one stage, attempted to screen out the radiation by using tin foil, and the tin foil disintegrated in the window. And this happened twice, and a group of people came out to investigate, and there were no conclusions. She was temporarily accommodated in a B&B in the Clontarf area. Their family were then transferred to a second B&B for a further period. Following an increase in radiation levels in the area and after much representation, a house became available in Clontarf, for which Dublin City Council, or the corporation at the time, and the Health Board undertook payment. This house proved satisfactory until antennae were erected on the side of a pub, the Dollymount Inn, about 80 metres from the house. All members of the family suffered in this house. Screening material was obtained, which brought about some respite. The circumstances of the family are totally unsatisfactory. Outside the screened area, Helen and her son and daughter continue to suffer. The Clontarf area has levels of radiation that are extremely uncomfortable for anyone suffering from electrical sensitivity. This is another ongoing family nightmare which doesn't seem to have an ending. My own experience, which is next on the list, in 1990 I was in Waterford, and I felt very uncomfortable in a house. I felt very uncomfortable in the garden. And I moved around the garden and found that I felt better in some parts of the garden and worse in others. I couldn't find anywhere to sleep in the house apart from downstairs in the living room on the floor. And then, even then, I didn't sleep. So that sort of puzzled me. I then began to ask questions about this, and somebody told me that it might possibly be microwave radiation. And I asked Dr. Woods, Michael Woods at the time, to investigate for me, and he wrote to Mr. Ray Burke, sent my letter along, and Mr. Burke said there was no problem. And this was the first introduction to a 15-year runaround. The arrival of masts in Raheny on the Garda station in the Sheeling Hotel, without planning permission, made matters worse. Letters to ministers and utilities received the same dismissive replies, which were full of the usual statements that there was no problem. Eventually, in order to get proper sleep and be free from the burning sensations, I had a chalet built at the end of the garden, where I sleep permanently now, and I got screening material. The recent arrival of antenna on the roofs of the Raheny Shopping Centre and the Foxhound Inn makes matters worse. There is no escape because I'm surrounded by masts. The only consolation is that most of the time they seem to be turned down sufficiently to make me able to live a reasonable quality of life, especially in the garden. Inside houses presents a problem for some people because the radiation is carried around the house by metal objects, including electrical wiring. Maura Dalton, who can't be here,